Welcome to the Iconic Man Podcast. I'm Sean Wilson. On the Iconic Man Podcast, we help men achieve their mission, find clarity in their mission, build intimacy in their intimate lives, as well as find freedom and maintain freedom for us as men by overcoming challenges, adversity, by having iconic guests on the show that bring in valuable wisdom, tips, and tricks so that we can overcome adversity in our lives and find clarity in areas that we may not have known otherwise. Today, I have a very special guest for you. He's very iconic. He's an international public speaker. He's been on Tony Robbins' stage on tour with Tony. He's been so successful in bodybuilding that he's featured by Men's Health magazine, and it inspired The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, to do a co-created collaborative with him. He has written his own book, By Overcoming Adversity from Victim to Victor. Without further ado, I welcome Nick Santonastasso to an Iconic Man show. Welcome, Nick. Thank you so much.
What a great intro. Let's go. I feel good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here, give some wisdom, and I'm an open book, and we can go wherever you like.
Yeah, if you don't mind, maybe share your story a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in 1996, and before I was born, the doctors went in for late ultrasound, and they sat them down, they pulled the baby up on the screen, and suddenly the doctor started freaking out, and they said, what's going on? What's wrong? And they said, well, from the looks of it, it doesn't look like his baby's limbs are being developed. Looks like he's missing his legs, looks like he's missing his arms. And they told them that my face was messed up, which they lied. And they classified me with what we call hand-heart syndrome. Hand-heart syndrome is a super rare genetic disorder that either leaves the babies with undeveloped limbs or undeveloped organs. And at the time of my birth in 1996, I was the 12th baby in medical history that they've ever seen this happen to. And out of the 12, 8 of those babies passed away due to undeveloped organs. Wow. So they gave me about a 30% chance to live. And clearly I survived. All my organs were 100% healthy, and the only thing that was affected were my limbs. And so here I am in the unicorn flesh of no legs, one arm, and one finger.
Wow, brother. Well, I'm so grateful that you've overcame the adversity and those odds, right? I mean, so you've inspired so many lives in the globe. He's known as one of the most influential public speakers in the world. How did you do that? And what did you do to kind of attain that?
Most of my success was built from trying to bury my inner child. And I think most of my success was trying to run away from all the pain that I felt, going through all the trials and tribulations as a kid with no legs, one arm. And I wanted to build big things so people loved me, and looking for external validation in all the wrong ways. And so I think I initially built success in a not sustainable way, and then, did a ton of work and realized that I'm already enough, I'm already whole, and walking back to wholeness, right, which we can talk about. But with the whole speaking thing, the only reason why I'm a speaker is because someone saw a gift in me that I didn't see myself. I think oftentimes as men and women, but in specific men, we can't see outside the label, or the fish doesn't know it's in water until you take it outside the fishbowl. And I had a gentleman, Ratmir, who you know of, who saw me at a mastermind, and I had shared my story, and Ratmir was like, "You're going to be on stage with Tony Robbins one day." And I was like, "Who's Tony Robbins?" I knew nothing about personal development. I knew nothing about speaking. I didn't see anybody in my family run a business. They were 9 to 5. I wasn't exposed to any of this stuff. And that was the pivotal moment for me where I was exposed to a whole different world, but also someone breathing life into me and being like, yo, you're valuable. There's a story there. You can save people with your testimony. We should probably look into this. And so with the speaking stuff, it was the analogy that I like to give. It's like a dusty trophy on the shelf, and you don't really realize the trophy until someone comes over and shines it. You're like, yo, look at your brand new trophy. You're like, it's always been there. You just didn't harness the power of it. And so my hallucination is that I probably had maybe a source-given gift of articulation, but didn't know how to exercise that muscle or what I was going to do with that muscle. And with divine timing and guided to the right place at the right time, Ratmir saw a gift in me. We co-collaborated, said we were going to go in business together, marry each other in business, and it's been 7 years.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, because, to get on the stages that you've got on, to coach the clients that you've coached, I found that our inner world is a reflection of our outer world, right? And could you elaborate on what wholeness means and how that inner world, when you change that inner world, how that, mirrored your outer world?
A lot of the times, getting into this world, I got into this world initially for money. I got initially into this world for significance. And as we know, the desire for money and the desire for fame are the two lowest vibrations. So I think early on I was vibrating at a very low frequency, but I was also making impact. I was getting significance and contribution in the way that I was serving people. So that was really amazing. But then you realize, at least for me, I always thought, when I didn't have money and I saw people with money, I'm like, I just need to get money and then I'll be whole, right? If I could just get the money, or if I could just get the car, or a lot of the times as humans we do this, it's like, well, when I get the house, then I'll be successful. Or when my bank account hits a specific number, then I get successful. And I think my great awakening was like paying myself 1 month like $50,000 or $60,000 and like not feeling anything different. And I was like, there's no way that those people talking about money doesn't make you, like, there's no way this could be right. And so I think through the success I showed or proved to myself of like, this doesn't really make me feel anything. But also there was a part of me, and still working through this, a massive part of me who ties my identity to how much money I have. And if the business wasn't doing well, I would feel like a less of a man. If the business was doing really great, I was on top of the world, I was confident, and I was certain. There was also a pattern for me that if my bank account would dip under a specific number, that I was totally in a suffering state, right? And so I've actually been in an interesting season for the past, I'd probably say even just 4 or 5 months, ever since I got back from Dispenza, of burning money to prove to myself that it doesn't define me. And I think that's the definition, or that's my hallucination of what wholeness is realizing that you've always been enough, nothing's missing. When you say you don't know, you actually do know. Like, we have everything. But I think with social conditioning and social programming and the matrix, and we can dive into all that stuff, is like, we forget who we are. We forget how powerful we are. We forget that we are source and we're cut from the cloth of the creator, whatever you believe in. And bro, we're jacked up because we have, everything's conditioning. Like, if you think about it, we're conditioned all the time. The lights and the cameras and the ads and the nonsense people say and the fear and the politics. Like, you're constantly conditioned to keep you at a low vibration, and as you know, right? So I think wholeness is realizing I'm already enough. I already have everything. And if I get to an emotional state of like, I'm already enough, then nothing's missing. What's pretty interesting is because when you get to an emotional state that nothing's missing, that's when everything comes into your life. It's so weird. What a trip, bro. Right? Life's a trip.
It's really a trip because like I experienced the same exact thing, tying my own self-worth to financial freedom or to having a nice house, a wife and kids and a dog. And what I realized was that whenever I went into an avenue, right, of life, and I found it was a cul-de-sac, I asked myself the right questions when I reached the end of the road. It's like, there's got to be something more. Yeah. And it's like, when I ask those questions, I get the right answer. And I feel like the really motivated men or women out in the world that like you, right? You went out and you've crushed. And it's not until we realize the thing to realize it's not the thing. Is that what you experienced?
It's a trip, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was, whether people like him or not, but I saw a quote by Will Smith, and he was like, I wish everybody could have the power to buy everything they want just to show them that it's not it. Yeah. He's like, I have all the money and I can buy anything and I can do everything, and it's not it. And I wish everybody could experience that so they stop chasing like the wrong things. Right. But I think you know, we walk our divine path and we have to go through that and realize like, oh, this wasn't it. Like, I think it's a great lesson. I also think that we are put here to experience all things, right? Like, I think we forget that we signed up for this before we came here. Yeah. And it's like, hey, you're going to go to Earth. And they're like, what do you do on Earth? And it's like, you're going to get cheated on. You're going to get rejected. You're going to get stomped on. Things are going to go great. You're going to get destroyed. You're going to experience everything. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then we get here and we forget, right? They wiped our memory. Yeah. I don't know what does, but it wiped our memory. And I think the quote that I really love is, we all come to Earth to walk ourselves back to home. We all come here to walk each other back down to home or back down to wholeness. And so I've been on this whole wholeness kick because I was broke, like a lot of men. I was just broken, chasing the wrong things, seeking validation in external things. And ultimately, even the man that knows it's an inside job, I was still unconsciously seeking things externally. And so I want to get to a place, lately the season of my life is, I want to get to a place that regardless of the houses and the things, that even if I was broke under a bridge with Rat Mirror, that we'd be having a blast. Yeah. Right? That's a beautiful place to be. And I believe when you get to that, like, that's when all the blessings come into your life. I think the laws of the universe or the laws of this realm are so trippy. And we know them, but sometimes we don't act in alignment. It's like, yo, you can't escape the laws.
Yeah.
You can't escape the invisible forces that run this whole entire thing. And we know them, but sometimes we still try to combat them.
So true. And on that note, finding that divine touch within yourself, it brings up the idea for me, like, of dark and light, and the judgment that we can have associated to the darkness, like, say, judgment or feeling not enough or fear, or tuning in more to the light. And so I'm curious, how have you faced the darkness in your life in uncertain times? Because I feel like it's kind of like a battle between the heart and the mind, right? The mind is like the creator of fear and certainty and tries to take control, in my perspective. Whereas the heart can, when we surrender into it and we feel the feelings, we feel the sensations, we feel that the loop-de-loop on the roller coaster called life that like you said, I completely agree that we signed up for this roller coaster. And when we hit a turn, we're like, oh my God. And it's like, this is scary. But it's like, that's why our soul came here, to have that experience. And so when we judge it, I feel like it creates more of a tumultuous experience.
Yeah, so I think I've reinvented my identity a ton. I think there's been a lot of times, especially in business as well, where I was lost. And there was a defining moment where, like, I was probably just like a year and a half ago, where I was like really lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do, how I wanted to serve people, if I wanted to continue doing this stuff, and how I was going to do it. And the realization was like, well, enjoy loss, because you're going to be found soon.
Oh, I love that.
You know what I'm saying? Like, on the other side of lost is found. And so there's a reason for every season, and to really embody whatever season that you're in, but also understanding that the pendulum always swings. Like, there's going to be days where the money's up, and there's going to be days where the money's down. There's going to be days where you're really happy and fulfilled, and then there's going to be days where you're not. And to accept that that's part of life. And also as men, like, there's like, to be okay with the fact that some days you're just not it. You're just not on, so you just ain't doing it today, and surrendering to that fact. And so, yeah, I've been on, I think with the dark, like talking about the light and the dark, there's been times with dark stuff or dark seasons where I definitely soothed with vices, whether that was like weed or video games, and not feeling the emotions. And, I'm a big believer in it. If you're going to heal it, you have to feel it.
Yeah.
And I think especially as men, we've been socially indoctrinated not to feel things. I think we live in a society where we are programmed to soothe. They throw food at our face and drugs at our face and alcohol at our face and porn's everywhere and all of these different things, so people don't feel, and they just like mush their brain.
Yeah.
And for example, like I went through a breakup. I broke up with my ex probably like 6-7 months ago, and I initially went full sobriety to make sure that I wasn't soothing. And there's actually a moment where I was in my garage, like bawling my eyes out, like just like sobbing. And then you get to a point where like the sobbing turned into like laughter, where I was like, oh, that felt so, like, I got goosebumps right now. Yeah. Like, it just felt so good. And so, bro, I want to get this straight for the audience too. Like, I have a lot of answers, but I don't know what I'm doing. Like, it really, who am I to tell you what we're doing here? And going back to like life's a trip, and this is so cool because this is a totally different conversation than the previous one. It's like a different route that we're going. Is like, no one knows what's going on.
Yes.
To tie it with a bow and come back to your question is, I think the darkness is our greatest teacher, right? And also like for the men that are listening as well, is like, your greatest guru isn't me. It's your porn addiction. Yeah. It's your food addiction. It's your weed addiction. Like, go analyze and get really curious about what ticks and what makes you want to soothe and why you do those things. Like, that's your greatest teacher. I can give you information, but you want to go into your own demons, they're going to teach you the best.
Yep. I completely agree, because as men, I feel like we have such an aversion to our dark side, and it's our ego trying to say, don't go there, stay in your own comfort zone. Because if you go there, you're going to you might die, right? But really, as men, we kind of need to go into the rite of passage or the crucible and have that experience where we are forged in fire. Would you agree with that?
100%. I think it's the rite of passage, right? And I think if we look at like other cultures like that aren't tapped into social norms and stuff, like their rite of passages is savage. The savage stuff like makes us look like little whiny men. And so I think going towards the adversity and going through the fire, I think is really important. But also like, I think going through the fire also symbolizes like reinventing identity. And I know for a fact that everything that we're doing right now may not be the thing that we're doing in 5 years.
Right.
We may be totally different, or 10 years or 15 years. And I think we're here to constantly reinvent and reevaluate our identity. But I 100% agree with men going into fire to make themselves strong.
Yeah.
But I also believe that men should be emotionally aware enough to feel things and know how to heal things or know how to ask for help. I think a lot of us, most of our beliefs in our model of the world was cultivated between 0 and 7 or 0 and 10 because our brain was in theta state, right? It's very suggestible. And if you, I was saying earlier, like my dad, like I never saw my dad cry. So like my thing was like, okay, you don't cry, like you don't show emotion, or if showing emotion's a weak, or, I watched my brother who was hooked on heroin not want to ask for help, and then he overdosed. And so the meaning is like, if I ask for help, it's weak, right? And I think if more men just leaned on other men and had a brotherhood, or asked for help, or educated themselves on how to be emotionally aware, that's also really important as well, because going through the flames, you're going to experience trauma, or you're going to experience adversity. And if you always harbor it and never communicate that adversity, you're going to build up one day until you're mentally unstable.
I feel like it resonates with men, right? It's like we're stuck in this tumultuous moment of our life, but we don't give ourselves permission to be vulnerable, to be able to, really, in my perspective, vulnerability is the most courageous thing we can do.
I think you're spot on, and I always make a joke. I'm like, I wonder what I did in my past life to then put me in this body. Like I don't know what I did in that life, for them to put me in this body. But I was, even with my physical situation, I'm almost forced to surrender to help.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of times where I felt weak, or I felt like I shouldn't ask for help. I want to be Mr. Independent. And then I get to this state of my life where I'm like, if things are more efficient if I just ask for help, like just open the damn water bottle for me. Like here, open the water bottle. Or can you help me do this? But there's a lot of times where I like my perception is projection. So whatever I perceive, I'm going to project into the world. There was a lot of times where I felt like that I was a burden to people, and I wasn't. And the reframe this is a pretty interesting reframe, but if you don't ask for help, you're robbing the person from serving you.
I love that.
Right? It's the same thing with like, men always want to like take care of the bill. So like if I was like, oh, I got this one, and you're like, no, let me do it, I would be like, don't rob me of the opportunity to serve you. And you'd be like, damn, I never thought about it that way, And then you'd let me take the bill and you let me pay, right? So that's the reframe. But I think Source, God, whatever you believe in, was very funny when he made me. He's like, I'm going to force you to ask for help.
I love that. So something that I've experienced in my journey is I've looked for external things to help me in the self-development space. Tony Robbins, Joe Dispenza, Brendan Burchard. And I initially started that to seek high performance in business, to have the more money, to seek the validation. But what I realized is as I went down that path, I realized that I started to get into more meditation, more spirituality, and that actually transcended all the other areas of life that I was trying to get better at. Have you had that experience too? Because I know you go into Joe Dispenza and meditate.
100%, right? I think it was Alan Watts. You know Alan Watts? He says that the most important work that you need to do is in the privacy of your own heart.
I like that, yeah.
And let's put it this way, at different seasons of your life, information hits differently. And so, for example, it's like when I was first exposed to Tony, and he's talking about like when you're in your head, you're dead. When you're in your heart, you're smart. I'm like, what does that mean? Right? Like I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense. Like I'm not picking up what you're putting down. What do you mean I need to change my state to change my life? Like there's a lot of times where I hear something one time and it doesn't make sense, And then going into Joe, things started to click when he's like, the mind is the antenna and the heart is the magnet, right? And when you're in your heart, like you channel Source and all these different things. And for me, my intention this season of life is to crack my heart open because it's closed for sure. Like I'm not this fully heart-centered. Like when I'm speaking and serving, that heart comes through. But like in day to day, I could be way more heart centered. I want to feel more. Like that's my intention. I want to feel more. And so when I started to open heart, right? When I started to activate the sacred center or the heart center, I would tend to focus on what's right and what I have and what's great about my life versus being in a not so good, like I'm not enough, I'm behind, I gotta go faster, I should have more money by now. And I think so the more that you activate heart, the more that you activate wholeness. And then when you're in a whole place, you can receive blessings, right? Like Joe Dispenza says, gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership. You can, if one day you exit your company for $10 million, but you're in a suffering state, you're not even going to be able to receive the blessing of the $10 million. Right. But also the heart being the magnet. I looked when I was in Joe Dispenza, and he was talking about like you can't get upgrades in the 3D world. You have to go into source. And by the way, for those like, I hope I don't sound crazy, but I looked at Rap and I was like, do you see how much we built pushing in the 3D world? I was like, I don't have to push anymore. I could just be a magnet. Like I could just
draw it to us.
Yeah, I could just draw it to me. Like I don't even need to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so that's been my intention, is to stay in meditation and daily and be in my heart center and be open to the mystical, right? And I've had a lot of mystical experience happens when you just surrender. And I think that's the big thing that men in entrepreneurship struggle with, is we're so outcome oriented.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're outcome oriented, you're trying to put the known over the unknown, and you block the mystical from happening. And so like I have goals that, the whiteboards everywhere and things, and we have intention and numbers that we want to hit, but the team knows that we're not attached to the way that it's going to manifest and how it's going to happen. And if we're behind on numbers, like it's to not make you feel less than, or if you're in a suffering state, it's just like come back to heart, come back to heart, come back to heart. Right. So, and what's really amazing about the heart is the heart was formed before the brain when you were a baby. So it has its own intelligence of its own. So I think there is a massive need for more men cracking open their heart. And I'm still on the path of doing that, because I would love to feel more.
Right. Yeah, because like I feel like our senses and our emotions and our feelings, they're the voice of our higher self, or of the creator, because they're unadulterated. When we try to put things to language, we try to put it into a word, like a linear format, and it just doesn't capture it. And so I like hearing this perspective, because I completely agree, and I have a hard time with it as well, opening my heart and feeling into my experience, especially when I'm triggered or when something's not going as planned, right? We have that attachment to the expectation of how things should go. And it's like, the moment it goes awry, it's like, oh shit, like grab the controls, but it's like, well, how do I surrender and just hold space for myself
100%.
And feel? Like, what have you been doing to help open your heart in that way?
The first thing is the meditation, synchronizing the energy centers, right? So that in itself is just a worthy opponent of staying in the present moment, because your brain's like coffee and I gotta send that email, and it's like coming back to the present moment. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I would say feeling, sitting in emotions more. Or example, with the money example that I gave you, like I intentionally put myself in a scenario where I'm typically attached to the outcome and overrode it. Right? It's like, hey, your bank account's going down. Like, can you still be in a beautiful state? It's like, oh, I can. So I unlock that, or unwire and rewire that. So when I'm aware of a pattern that is not serving me, I'll intentionally spark that pattern to like navigate it, right? To feel it, to see if I can get out of it, to see how long it lasts. But there was a moment the other day where I was at a super dark place, and I didn't get out of my bed till 9 p.m., bro. It was bad, right? And then what's pretty wild is, you sit in bed all day and you're in a victim, or you're sleeping and you're numbing, and then I come out at 9 p.m., my boys are here, and within 15 minutes, my total state has changed. I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, you could have just overcome this in 15 minutes with your tribe. But instead, like, you sat in your shitty diaper and touche,
Right. Here's a gentleman that's crushing at the highest level. He has hard days too. We all do. And our mind tends to create a story that, well, I'm not enough. There are other people out there that are crushing it, but really we're all in the same game. And I couldn't agree with you more. None of us know what this place is, right?
No idea.
We have no idea. And so it's like our beliefs and our linkages in our mind create our experience. And so if we are the creators of our own reality, what reality do you choose to create and why? And are you just recreating your inner child's emotional home of a traumatized past, right? And like when we're triggered, it's like, we can ask ourselves, does this emotion remind me of something from our past? You do a lot of reframing.
Yeah.
How do you reframe things with yourself? Because I've noticed I can't coach myself as easy.
Yeah. A few things, right? We can't coach yourself as easy, and also the more personal development work you do, the less you think you need it. The ego's like, you don't need it. You're already too good. Bro, you're good. You got it. You've been Tony's leadership, and you've done this. It's like, I don't have unconscious patterns. It's like, that's your first unconscious pattern, that you think you don't have unconscious patterns, right? The very belief that you don't have any beliefs that are holding you back is the belief that's holding you back. What was the, I was going to go down a rabbit hole. What was the question again?
Yeah, like how do you reframe things with yourself?
Yeah, for me, that was a big thing that I realized. Like, remember I said you can't see outside like your label, right? So I realized that with other people, it's so natural to me to help them reframe the situation. So like that, I guess as a superpower, I've been forced to put in a situation where like I'm always reframing. So for me, it comes down, like you said, the questions we ask ourselves. So I'm always asking myself, what's the gift? Okay. What's the gift? What's the learning? And who am I becoming because I'm going through this? Because right questions lead to the right answers. And so it's very, very important to, with repetition, ask the right questions in the moments of suffering state. Like, how can I reframe this? Also, I have core beliefs that remind me, or like I have the 10 commandments for me, right? And I don't have to go through all of them, but I have the 10 commandments, or the 10 beliefs of a victor. And one of them is, through thick and thin, I find the learnings.
That's amazing.
Right? Through thick and thin, I find the learnings. So regardless of what I'm going through, I will find the learnings and I'll find the gifts. Maybe not in the moment, I don't want to do it right away, but I'll find the gifts and I'll find the learnings, and I'll neutralize the event. I think the other thing too is understanding that disruption always follows intention. So going back to the meaning we attach to things becomes the experience. Okay. So most people believe that when I experience a problem, I should run from it. What if the meaning you gave problems was a sign from Creator that I was moving in the right direction? Because people who stay in comfort zone don't experience problems. Right. But people who are creating, or people who are trying to be more, to serve more, to give more, they're going to experience disruption and they're going to experience problems. So for me, my meaning that I give problems is, that's a head nod. Like, hey, you're going in the right direction. There's disruption. For other people, when they experience a problem, it's like, I'm doing bad. I should probably stop. Right. Or another thing, like when people experience failure, they think like it's just not for them. And it's just like, no, this is a worthy opponent. Right? I'm getting tested. I'm always getting tested by the universe to see if you really want it. So I think for me, I'm a master of meaning, and the meaning that I attach to things, I'm intentionally empowering meanings versus disempowering meanings. But also like my whole tribe is indoctrinated in the same language that I use. Right? Like everybody shares the same language and the same mental syntax. So even when Baby Yoda goes down, we got Ratmir, who's like, what are you going to go back to Walmart? Like, what are you doing? Like, okay, you're having your moment. Or, there's a really good concept. It's a book. I just know the concept. It's the gap versus the gain. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't.
So the gap versus the gain. You got to ask yourself in moments of suffering, am I focusing on the gap of how far away I am from the goal, or am I focused on the gain of where I was and how far I came? Okay. So most of the time, like as dudes, we're in the gap of like, I'm not there yet. I don't have enough money, or I didn't do that thing, or I didn't get her, or whatever it is. So like there was a moment where I told Ratmir, I'm like, damn, bro, like we're behind like on our targets, this year. And he's like, we did 1.5. You made $1.5 million last year. I was like, oh, I forgot. Like he's like, are you in the gap or in the gain? Right. Like, and so you need outside source to remind you of like, yo, are you in the gap or are you in the gain right now? Right. So just to recap that, it's like the meaning you attach to the experience becomes the experience. So start becoming the master of meaning. We're meaning making mechanisms, and we're always attaching disempowering meaning. So if you shift the meaning, and then also identify if you're in the gap or you're in the gain, and measure backwards. If you really want to experience gratitude, measure backwards.
I like that so much. It reminds me of Tony's concept of we're so apt to make a highway to suffering and a dirt road to happiness and abundance, when it should be the other way around, right? It's we need to rewire this thing. And that's what Joe Dispenza says, is we need to rewire the neurosynaptic connections in our brains so that we can go easily to the positive states, the higher states of energy and vibration, right?
It's so funny what humans do.
Yeah.
You know, like we make it really easy to feel shitty about ourselves, and we make it really difficult to feel happy about ourselves.
Yep.
And we're in control of those rules. We just got to shift the rules.
Yep. And I think the most powerful thing about our abilities here is our state. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%, right? It's like you are what you feel. What you feel is your life. And so based on your emotional state, you're going to act in alignment with that state.
Yep.
But what's interesting is some people have felt so shitty for so long that they don't know what it feels like to feel good.
Yep.
So they're just comfortable in that emotional home of suffering, right? It's like they can't see outside the diaper.
Yep.
You know, they can't see outside the shitty diaper, and understand that everybody should experience happiness. Like if it's sad, bro. If you walk down the streets in America, New York City, and ask someone like, "Are you happy?" They'd be like, "No."
Right.
Most people aren't happy.
Yeah.
They think it's a fairy tale. They think it's this well-off thing that it's a fantasy, and that's because they don't have evidence that happiness is possible. Because our proximity sucks, and for themselves, they don't have any evidence that it's possible.
Something that I use is like as a beacon of truth. It's like the totem on Inception. It's like, what are the quality of my thoughts? What are the quality of my emotions? What are the quality of my relationships? And am I talking about people, or am I talking about ideas? And I feel like when we're at a higher vibration, we tend to go to creation energy, and we're like upward spiraling. Yeah. Whereas when we go to downward energy, we tend to criticize or think of scarcity. And so, gentlemen, that's a good way that you can kind of run your own totem on your life to see what state are you operating in right now. And when you see like that you're in a state, what do you do to like snap yourself out of it?
It's a good question. Sometimes I stay in there. I'm like, how about you sit here for a little bit? You know, like how about you sit here and just experience this emotion? But my thing is, I ask myself, what scenario have I created in my head that wasn't real, or that I'm reinforcing that's making me feel this way?
That's powerful.
Right? Because what you focus on, you get more of. What you focus on, you feel. What you feel is your life. So if you're feeling a specific emotion, you've created or giving energy to a specific scenario, a specific person inside of your brain, and you're feeling it in the present moment. It's neuron mirroring, right? The brain can't decipher what's real and what's not. And so if I had you go to a moment, I want you to focus on a moment where you felt really insecure, like you would feel it, your whole physiology would change. And then we can have you shake your body out. And I could say, I want you to go to a moment where you felt really certain and confident, and want you to feel that. Actually, it would probably be easier for you to feel the suffering emotion versus feeling the confident and certain, because it's been such a long time since they felt it. So for me, I'm always observing, what did I create, or what am I reinforcing that's making me feel this way? Because I'm doing it to myself. I'm the only one that's doing it, right?
I love that.
I'm the one that's creating up my emotional state. And if I'm not feeling a good way, like I've created something. And so that's my process of being the observer. Yeah. You know, and a little trippy thing too is like, if you can hear the voice in your head, who's listening?
That's powerful.
Who's listening? Or right now, like in your head right now, you could say the word blue 5 times. You can hear it. So who's listening? I don't know what that means. Is it consciousness? Is it your higher self? Is it the observer? Like,
yeah, and that's it, right? You give a beautiful analogy of time, right? And it's not linear. And if you don't, would you mind sharing that? It's so powerful.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a latest thought process for me, but you know, most people think time is, you know, the past and the present and the future. But as we know with quantum theory, is like time's up and down, and there's all these different timelines, right? And every single version of you exists. There's a universe where like you've already died. I've already died. I've had multiple experiences in my life, and I don't even know if I'm tripping right now. Like this may not even be. I might be dead right now. Right. But there's been multiple points in my life where I'm like, I almost died. Yep. And there's probably a reality where I did die. Yep. You know, so every single scenario exists out there in quantum theory. And with that belief, understanding that you're one small stutter step from unlocking your blessing, unlocking the flow, unlocking the currency, unlocking the fulfillment. And so if something's not working and there's a block, just pivot. Keep pivoting, keep pivoting. You're gonna unlock a blessing. And that's what I feel like even with the like teaching the speaking stuff. Like once I pivoted to teaching the speaking stuff, I like, zoom, it like unlocked. I'm like, oh, there's something here. Or same with me bringing back like funny videos. Once I pivoted back into funny videos, boom, 30 million views on YouTube, one small stutter step, right? So I proved to myself time and time again that we're just one step away from quantum jumping or quantum leaping, like timeline jumping, right? Like y'all realize too, like within 2-3 weeks, 1 month, you can wake up and have totally different friends.
Yeah.
You can have totally different proximity. You can be learning a totally different skill. You can have totally more money in your bank account. It's all readily available for you.
When we say succumb to a doctrine, we're kind of in a way giving away our own power. And so what I've noticed is the moment we can transcend anything that's trying to keep us in a stuck way of being or stuck thought pattern, it's a separation from self. And when we can meditate long enough or go do psychedelics like ayahuasca or bufo or even mushrooms, what happens is we can leave our body and get a glimpse of what this place is. Technically, it's like we're in the spiritual dimension, living in the beyond space and time if we slow down enough to find the generous present moment, as Dr. Joe likes to say. And when we find that moment, we get to see that we're a spiritual being here living out our experience. And time, the illusion of time goes away. Like, what, right? It's not real. So time isn't real.
Just an easy example to prove to you that time's not real. If you can remember a moment when you were in high school and you were looking at the clock, waiting for the bell to tick, waiting for it, like tick, tick, tick. You're like, yo, math class is going forever. So time's going really slow. And then there's probably an activity where you do it and you're like, whoa, time flew by so fast. It's not real.
Our perception of time. And so what happens is I feel like when we see these illusions, right, we need to get good at pattern recognition and pattern redesign and illusion recognition. And so it's like, how do we see that? How do we get a glimpse of ourselves outside of ourselves? And this is, I think, what do you think? Travel? What have been big consciousness expanders for you?
Travel for sure. I mean, this is a rabbit hole. I'm gonna get some hate for this, but I'll go here anyway. But like, we've been indoctrinated that America is this amazing place. Which, by the way, capitalism's great, freedom is great. I think there was a specific era where there was more honor in the military, all this different type of stuff. And they indoctrinated us that like, don't go to other places, it's dangerous. And then I go to a place like Medellin, Colombia, and I'm like, this place is incredible. You know, like the culture, the people, the vibe, they're not like hustle and bustle. Like there's a totally different life out there. So I think traveling, definitely. And then also I think the medicines, you know, like psilocybin. I haven't done ayahuasca or bufo, but I've done, you know, psilocybin. And psilocybin for me is like literally, and I should probably do it soon because I feel like it resets the veil. Like, bro, like I think about all of the conditioning when I'm on mushrooms. I'm like, you know, I'll think about like, what's a Monday?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's a concept.
What is Monday? What's a weekend?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense. Why am I sleeping? Like, what is sleep? Like, I really started to question everything. And beliefs only stay beliefs unless you question them. And so I think those things that they lower the veil are good to be like, wow, like this is, I don't know, bro. It's not real. It's a bunch of conditioning. I remember doing. I've never shared this before, but I remember doing this. I did like probably like 2 grams of mushrooms before I went on Jordan Belfort's podcast. But the day after, but I was in LA and I did it with some buddies at night, and we just laid in his music studio the whole time, and we're just hanging out. And then I stayed up the whole night, and then on my way to Jordan Belfort's podcast, I was looking around LA. I'm like, yo, there is conditioning everywhere, these advertisements and these billboards. And then I got on that podcast and just went on a tangent of like, they're out to get you. I think he removed the podcast because I was just like total. Right out of a mushroom journey. And I'm like, dude, this is all fake. He's like, who's they? I was like, I don't know. Right. But like, this is all, like, I was out there. But he just, Alan Watts says it again and really well. He says, although although we're only living, right now, like you can only see we're living within the body in this 3D, we know we're of the spirit. We know we're of the soul. So like we forget.
Yep.
We forget every day. Like whatever, I don't care how conscious you think you are, like, bro, you forget like this ain't real.
Yeah.
That ain't it.
Yeah, for sure. And I completely agree because, I meditate about an hour a day and I try to eat healthy. And man, I feel like self-care routine is such a powerful container for your own mental health. You're connecting to your source. Do you feel that too in your experience?
Yeah, for sure, right? Clean vessel, clean antenna, right?
Yeah.
So, even yesterday I taught for 7 hours. I was fasted. Maybe I ate like a grape and some pieces of cheese, but like I don't want anything to be heavy within the vessel as I'm serving and let things come in through. I think also when serving, it's important to drop into heart before you get on stage. So get into a heart-centered place because you just serve from a better, just a better place. And then, ultimately, if you're not taking care of your temple, you're just going to come back and have to learn your lesson again. Another soul round, right?
I love that, yeah. So I want to run something by you. Something I found within Tony's work is we tend to start with significance. The external validation, the acceptance, the big bank account, the house, the car, and certainty. I need to know I'm in control of this thing. And then as we tend to go and crash through life and maybe think about the me phase, what tends to happen is we become more vulnerable, we bring in the feminine energy, and then that heart might start to tune in, and we might start to question ourselves. Is this what I should be doing? And then what I've noticed is if there's a big crash in the road, right, with that mission or whatever it may be, we tend to ask ourselves, is this what I really want to be doing, and why? And it's like, I feel like in some men's lives, that question will lead us to our heart, and then we'll then shift into the altruistic perspective of heartfelt service. And my question for you is, how can we close that timeline for men where we actually find the heart-centered place of service? Because that, gentleman, is where everything starts happening for you, right? It just starts coming to you. You're giving love, you're receiving money, you're getting all the things you've always wanted, but you're not working, you're actually serving. Because you're a servant-based leader, and that's, I think, the highest level. And I see you with such an open heart and your authenticity, and that's why I knew you'd be such an epic guest for this podcast. And thank you, brother, for your service to the world, to yourself, and being here today. My question for you is, looking back in your journey, how could we condense that transition into the heart and serving rather than trying to go out and earn and validate, do you think? Yeah,
that's a good question. Here's an interesting perspective. Do we need to condense the gap, or should they just walk that timeline and learn the lesson?
That's a good question.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is it meant to condense? Or are they meant to walk down the dead end so they know that I shouldn't go down that road before? Right? So I'm not saying I have the right answer, but I'm saying some men definitely do need to walk down an unfulfilling path so they realize the contrast that it's not for them. And I think we're all going to do that. But I think also just very easy, simple questions is, and we asked these yesterday when we were in the room, is like, what do you want to dig your well in? Like what really fires you up? What topic? Like, or what have you been through that you can save other people's lives with? And what can you do for other people, and how can you condense time for them? And when you really identify that, like now you're focused on serving, now you're focused on condensing time for people, now you're focusing on transformation. And if you focus on transformation, the money will be a byproduct, not pretending to be serving and thinking like there's a dollar sign over someone's head. I think that's the big shift. And so like, if you just focus on serving, if you just focus on transformation, you'll feel the fuzzy feeling of fulfillment, which we're actually all seeking, right? Like men as well. Like you don't want the car, you want how the car is going to make you feel, right? And so the moment that I experienced the emotion of fulfillment, I was like, I want more of that. It was at a very early age. It's probably like 18 years old, where I was on a wrestling mat, and I got beat up, and then I was coming off the mat, and this lady came up to me crying, and I'm like, oh man, what did I do wrong? And she was like, no, like my daughter's on the sideline and she never wanted to do a sport, and she saw you out there and she wants to try all these things. I want to thank you. And I felt a feeling, and I didn't know what the feeling was, but it was fulfillment. I was like, what if I could do more of that, right? That's what we're seeking. And so I'm a firm believer, if you help enough people get what they want, you can have anything that you want in life. And I'm an offering to the world. Like, I mean, I talk about religion as giving power away and stuff. I have a mural of Christ right there. Christ is in my garage. It's like, why is that? Because he was the epitome of an offering. He gave his whole life to the world. Whether the man was real, whether the man was not, whether he was who he says he was, ultimately, the story of Christ is that he was an offering. Yeah. He built himself in the greatest version of man and gave it to the world. Yeah. And that's our goal, especially here, men listening. Build yourself into the greatest version of man that your inner child needs as well, but also build yourself into the greatest version of man and give yourself to the world. This human experience isn't solely for you. It's for all the people that you're going to help with who you become along the way.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Sweet. Well, so I just attended Nick's Inner Circle and Stage Secrets Masterclass in person in his studio. It was the most epic experience that I've ever had within an in-person event. I would highly recommend that you check it out. And Nick, how can everyone find you? Because he just drops so much fire in everything that he does. I highly recommend that you attend his masterclasses online, go to his in-person events, buy his book. So how can they find you?
So Instagram, YouTube, OnlyFans. No, I'm just kidding. None of that stuff. But Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Nick Santonastasso, the most handsome man with no legs and one arm with tattoos. You'll find me out there.
Nice. All right.
Well. And I'll end with this as well. Men, there are people who are born in the family, and pain is brought through the lineage until one man is willing to feel it. And if you're listening to this podcast, my intention or my hallucination is that there's something inside you that says, I'm the one. I'm the one that's going to feel. I'm the one that's going to heal. I'm the one that's going to upgrade my lineage. I'm going to upgrade my psychology, and I'm going to trickle it down to my bloodline. And if your ancestors were looking at you, would they buy tickets to your movie, or would they skip and go to the next one? Knowledge of potential power. The real power comes from implementation. So don't just take notes and not do anything with it. Got to close the execution gap. Don't be that guy or girl who's got a big brain but does nothing.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Nick. I love you, brother.
Love you, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Send it love.
Yes, sir. So the Iconic Man podcast, if you like this show, I highly recommend that you share it with a friend. Click the like button, subscribe, and be your authentic self. Open your heart, step through fear, and just open your life up to an experience that makes you scared. That's the truth. Your fear is your gift, and the fear is a doorway, brother. Stay on the path, and I'll see you next time. If you need help overcoming your life obstacles or embodying your masculinity, then go to pathtoclarity.com/iconic man to sign up for my Iconic Man program, which will lead you to your iconic masculinity within.